We met in college. I was a senior and she was a sophomore. She was a good-looking woman and I was a bit of a nerd. It took me a few beers at one of the parties, but I was able to approach her. When I asked her to dance, she said yes. We started talking. I used one of the old phrases, "What's a girl like you doing in a place like this?" I told her I'm a geek and I don't date. She laughed and told me I was inept, but agreed to dance with me anyway. We both had too much to drink, and she told me that she had broken up with her ex-boyfriend 2 days before and decided to just go out and have fun. Her friend told her about this party and she came to it. We both ended up getting drunk and having sex in my dorm room. I left my cap on the doorknob so my roommate wouldn't bother us. That was the first time I ever used the cap. My roommate always got the girl. I don't remember much about the sex that night, but judging by the way the bed looked in the morning, we must have had a good time. I got up and took a quick shower and then woke Susan up. When she woke up, she didn't look too pleased with herself. I pointed her to the bathroom and she went into the shower. After her shower, she behaved a little better. She really was a nice-looking woman. Looking at the two of us, I doubt anyone would have thought we were a couple. I made her breakfast before taking her to the hostel. I asked her if I could go out with her again, and she said she wasn't ready to date again, but if she saw me at parties, she wouldn't leave. In hindsight, I think that in that way she meant to say that she didn't think I was good enough for her. I'd seen her at other parties from time to time, but she was hanging out with her girlfriends and dancing with other guys. And why wouldn't she? She was beautiful and available. She danced with me when I asked her out. I didn't know if I cared about her or if I was just being nice. I come from a good family and was raised with good family values. The problem is that I didn't stick to them in college. I went to parties and got drunk a few times. Besides Susan, I slept with several other girls during my college years. Unfortunately, they were party thugs. The girls were willing to have sex with anyone for the price of admission. I guess that was one way to get laid without going to a hooker. I wanted to get a girlfriend, but geek girls didn't like to party. I put sex before commitment. I was miserable, and my roommate noticed it. Tony DeMarco was a good-looking Italian guy from New York who wanted to come to our college because of the excellent computer science program he offered. We became very good friends. He wasn't as shy as I was, but we helped each other with our studies. All I can say is that we became as close as brothers, and no, neither of us knew what gay meant. Tony was the one who made sure I was invited to the parties where I did get laid. He had connections. That's what I call a friend. I believe the final sealing of the bond between us occurred the day we were leaving class and he slipped on the steps. He fell backwards and his head hit the concrete. He was motionless, limp, blue in the face, and not breathing. From somewhere in the back of my mind, a story about someone swallowing their tongue came to mind. This interested me greatly, and I remembered what the solution was. I stood behind him, tilted his head back, reached into his open mouth, and hooked my fingers around his twisted tongue to bring it back into place. As his airway opened, his lungs sucked in huge amounts of air, and his skin color began to return to normal. I realized I was close to tears at the thought of my best friend being hurt. He opened his eyes and saw me holding his head, my face contorted with emotion. "Mark," he wheezed. "What happened?" "Don't worry, Tony, it'll be fine. It's just my tongue got out of my mouth." "Eh? Well, let me up, okay?" "I'm fine." After the medics finished examining Tony, they gave him a positive report and we went back to the dorm. As we approached the front of the building, Tony stopped, noticing a limo parked out front with the driver standing near the back door. Shrugging, Tony went to the limo, and as he approached the car, the driver opened the back door and his father stepped out. Angelo DeMarco was an imposing figure, 6 feet and 220 pounds, and he had a smile to match. He hugged Tony and breathed a sigh of relief when he realized his son was okay. "Dad, it's Mark. He's," muttered Tony. "I know who he is," Angelo smiled. "Mark, I owe you for saving my son. I owe you a debt of gratitude. If you need any help, come to me, okay? Don't forget, I mean it, anytime." He shook my hand. 5 minutes later, Tony was gone, back in New York, leaving me wondering if I'd ever had a real friend. Then I met Susan my senior year of high school. After our one and only meeting, I saw her on campus from time to time, and she was always nice to me. I guess I thought she might have feelings for me. I decided to ask her out again, and she said yes. She seemed a little different than the last few times I had talked to her. Not as carefree as she was at the parties. We went to dinner and a movie. She actually held my hand and smiled at me. We had sex in the car. We did it 3 times, and the last time I didn't use a condom. I remember asking her if she wanted me to put one on now, and she said no. I figured she must be on the pill. I asked her if she wanted to go out again next week, and she said yes. I guess I got a girlfriend. We saw each other the next few weekends, and she told me we had a problem. Mark, I'm pregnant. You're the only man I've ever been with. What are we going to do? I was shocked. I had been raised to do as I saw fit, even though I had a feeling Susan was using me. I was stupid enough to agree to this just for sex. I guess it was time to pay the price. I was graduating in a month, and I had a position ready at my father's insurance office. I took business courses that were supposed to help me become a licensed insurance agent. Susan was raised by her grandparents. Her parents died in a car accident when she was 12 years old. Her grandparents said they would help her with her education. She wanted to become a law clerk. That's where the blowback came. I was in favor of a woman's right to choose, but I was still against abortion. It would be hard for me to kill my child. I guess it's different if it's someone else's choice. Let's get married, I said. There's a good position waiting for me next month, and you can continue your education. You can take 1 semester off when the baby is born. We'll be able to do that. I love you, and I want our baby. I really wasn't sure if I loved her or not, but I wanted to do the right thing. I knew the alternative was a paid abortion, and I really didn't want to do that. I doubted that she loved me, but we agreed to get married. I wrote home to my parents and told them I was getting married after graduation. I told them that Susan, whom they never met, was pregnant, but we loved each other and would be married soon. I've mentioned before that my father owned an insurance agency. Actually, it was more than that. He also sold real estate and was in the auction business. We weren't rich, but we lived quite well. Susan and I were married a month after I graduated. We invited Susan's grandparents to the wedding. They seemed like very nice people and were happy for Susan and me. They thanked me for doing the right thing for Susan. For a few minutes, they talked to me privately. Mark, we know Susan can be a little wild and stubborn, and we've done our best with her. As you probably know, she loses her temper when she doesn't get her way. The truth was that I didn't know anything about her. We got drunk, had sex, and about 2 months later we met and started dating. The next thing I knew, she was pregnant. I figured she found out she was pregnant and got scared. So she started dating me. We hit it off, and she decided I was the solution to her dilemma. The thing is, she's a beautiful woman. She has a nice personality, and, as I later found out, she's not a bad actress. My parents liked her and always helped them. We started renting a nice 3-bedroom house with an option to buy within a year. I thought we were good together. The sex was good, especially for the first couple of years. After the baby was born, Susan took a semester leave of absence that lasted only 10 weeks. She transferred to a college that was only a few miles from home. She was able to commute to school without a problem. My mom looked after our daughter Trina while Susan attended school. I liked my job. I sold insurance and real estate. I helped at auctions, but there was no way I could be an auctioneer. Dad and his employee Bob did the auctioneering. I didn't know how most married couples behaved, since my parents were the only ones I lived with. But it seemed to me that they were closer than Susan and I were. For the first 2 years we lived like this. I worked and Susan went to school. In the evening, we stayed home with Trina. We would watch TV and Trina would play on the floor. Maybe twice a week we had sex. It was good. I don't remember her ever complaining. Susan started on the pill after Trina was born. We didn't want any more children. Everything was going well until Susan graduated from high school. I asked her if she wanted to work for our firm, but she said she wanted to do billing or be a secretary in a law office. Her wish came true. She started working in a large law office. She was hired as a secretary. I thought the extra income would be nice, but Susan spent it all on herself. Don't get me wrong. I was making good money and providing for all of our needs. As soon as Susan started getting a paycheck, everything we owned became not good enough. She had to have a new car. Of course, it had to be a sports car. Then she started shopping for furniture and appliances. I told her I wouldn't buy everything new. If she wanted everything new, let her pay for it herself. She was stubborn and got her way, just like her grandparents said. She didn't want to have sex with me for over a month. Finally, I gave in like a wuss. I told her I would pay for half of the new furniture and appliances. I never saw a dime of the rest of her money. I didn't even know how much she made. When it came time to file her tax return, she said her bosses thought we should file separately. Since they were lawyers, I agreed with her. I found out later that they never told her that. She just didn't want me to know how much she made. She bought her own clothes. She had a whole closet. Some of the clothes she wore seemed a little short or a little too sexy for the office, but when I brought it up, there was an argument every time. Not 6 months after starting work, she declared that she needed a night out with the girls. She needed what she called her private time. So every Friday night I knew she was going out with the girls. She was usually home by midnight. I had no problem with that. I played golf twice a week, so I had no right to complain. When the golf season was over, I joined the bowling team along with the other agents in our office. Dad's business was our sponsor. That's how we lived until Trina started school. Susan would lay out her clothes the night before, and I would always get up with Trina. We would eat breakfast together, and I would always drive her to school. I would pick her up unless I had an appointment, then Mom would take her to her house until either Susan or I picked her up. As time went on, Susan and I began to drift further and further apart. It happened gradually, but I could see it happening. She was never interested in my friends, but she acted cordial to them when we saw each other. Behind their backs, she called them weirdos, nerds, and other words. She had a different circle of friends. She invited them to visit her, to play cards and the like. I always played the role of a good husband, trying to avoid quarrels. I was never interested in her friends. It was like going back to college. Conversations often centered on sex, and parties were always drunken soirees at their house. If I didn't want to go, there was bound to be an argument. Sometimes I thought the men were a little flirtatious with Susan. If I told her about it, she only laughed. In fact, I was often the butt of jokes. Susan worked late sometimes. During that time, Trina and I became best friends. She confided in me and told me everything that happened at school. I helped her with her homework every night, and there wasn't much, and she loved doing it. I attended teacher conferences and supported Trina in whatever she did. Susan still treated Trina well when she was home. Susan always said, "Honey, this," and "Honey, that," even though all Trina wanted was for her mom to be around more often. If Trina mentioned that she wished her mom was in school, Susan always said she had to work to keep bread on the table. We had been married for 7 years, and I often went online after putting Trina to bed. I started reading stories about cheating wives. I read story after story and learned that Susan had been doing the same thing for years. Was I being paranoid or was Susan cheating on me? I had no doubt that I was living with a cheating wife. However, she was a good actress. I started watching for signs such as phone conversations. She would often end the conversation or change the subject when I entered the room. She always deleted all messages and regularly cleared the caller ID. I noticed that after outings with friends, she always washed her clothes the next day, especially her underwear. There were many other signs too, which I read about on the story page. She never wanted sex after coming home from a party. If I left for a meeting, Trina often stayed at my parents' house. I thought about hiring a private investigator to follow her, but there was no point. We lived in a state where divorce was a 50-50 split. I considered buying surveillance equipment like they did in the stories, but I had no doubt she was fooling around, and besides, I couldn't afford it. It was Trina that worried me the most. She was the reason I stayed with Susan. If the divorce happened, I might not be able to see Trina very often. She was my life. Susan started going to his friends' houses more often. She used any excuse. I went with her from time to time, but I never enjoyed myself. She often flaunted herself in front of other men. It was as if she dared to do something. There came a point where everything I was doing wasn't good enough. Nothing we owned was as beautiful as her friends. We still had sex, but I was lucky if it happened once a month. She didn't enjoy it anymore. I felt like she was doing it out of pity for me. I stayed with her for Trina's sake, which I now realize was the wrong reason. One day, everything went downhill. I came back a day early from a trip. This time I did as I had read in the stories and did not call home. When I arrived, it was already evening. An unfamiliar car was parked in our driveway. I got out of the car, walked over quietly, and unlocked the front door. The light was on in the living room, but no one was there. I could hear sounds coming from our bedroom. Yeah, I like that. It was Susan having fun on our bed. I was pissed, but not surprised to see Brad having fun with Susan. He ran the physical education center that Susan went to. He flirted with her all the time, But this time he got caught. It's worth mentioning that Brad's wife Jill is a model. She mostly does face and hand modeling, but she has an amazing body. She is not one of those skinny models you see on the runways. Why would a man cheat with a 7 when there's a 10 waiting for him at home? I've known Jill for a long time, and she's one of the few people Susan knows who I like. Brad had just released his charge at Susan when I walked in on them. "What the hell?" said I. "What are you doing home? You should have called first." "There, now you know." "Get out of the room so we can get dressed," Susan exclaimed. "Yeah, maybe I'll call Jill and invite her over," I replied. "You tell Jill and I'll kick your ass, you wuss," Brad said. I stood in the room. Brad was right, he could kick my ass, but at least I should have resisted. I thought, what's the use? I'll just get my ass kicked and Susan will enjoy what she sees. I left the room and heard them muttering, but they had already closed the door. Brad came out first. "Listen, you wuss. I meant what I said about Jill. If she finds out, you're going to the hospital. Do you understand, asshole?" "Just get out of my house," was all I could reply. He walked over to me, pinned me against the wall, clenched his fist and laughed. Then he turned and walked out. I stood there like a statue. Susan came out and stared at me. "Okay, now you know." "I tried to keep it from you, but I knew you would find out someday," Susan said. "I want a divorce. I'm going to start the paperwork tomorrow. I wish you would just leave." She looked at me and laughed. "You won't divorce me. You don't have the courage. Besides, I'll get half of everything you own. You can't afford that. Besides, you'll miss your precious daughter. What will you say to her?" "I'm going to tell her the truth. Her mother is a cheating whore and we're getting a divorce. She's a smart girl and I'm sure she'll get over it." "Hell, you're not here half the time anyway." "I'm not going anywhere and you're not man enough to make me." "I suggest you move to the guest room if you don't want to be with me," Susan replied. I left the house and picked up Trina. I had to talk to Trina and tell her the truth. I would have liked to keep it from her, but there was no way I could stay with her mother. I picked her up at school and while we talked, I took her to get a pizza. "Trina, there's something I need to tell you. It's about your mom and me." "You're getting a divorce, aren't you, Daddy?" she said to me. "Yes, but I wanted to tell you not to get too upset." "I'm sorry, dear, but your mom and I can't stay together anymore." "You found out she cheated on you, didn't you, Dad?" "I knew about it a long time ago and tried to hide it from you, but I knew one day you would find out." "Can I live with you, Daddy?" Trina said. "What? You knew your mom was having an affair and you didn't tell me?" "I don't understand," I told her. "Dad, I love you and I don't want you to get hurt. I figured as long as you didn't find out, it wouldn't hurt you." Even though she was still a child of 7 years old, she was smart. "You mean you didn't tell me you knew your mom was cheating on me because you didn't want me to get hurt?" "How long have you known about it?" I asked. "I knew about it since I saw her with Uncle Joe a few months ago. I was hoping it was a one-time thing with him, but later I saw her with Warren, what's his name, the guy from the grocery store. She was also too close to her friends when we went to parties. I'm sorry, Dad, but I knew you'd find out someday. I just wish it had happened later instead of sooner." "Oh my goodness, my sweet little daughter knew her mom had affairs, but didn't tell me because she didn't want to hurt me. I didn't want to ask her, but I needed to know how she knew about her mother in the first place. Uncle Joe wasn't really an uncle. Trina only called him that because her mom told her to, out of respect." "Honey, of course your mom didn't do anything. In front of you?" I asked. "No, Daddy, you were on a trip and I was staying with my friend Stacy on the next street over. I came home to get my bike and when I went into the garage, I heard strange noises in the house. I looked in there and saw Uncle Joe and my mom. I realized what they were doing and quietly left." "Are you sure, Trina?" "Yeah, Dad. I heard the same sounds at your and Mom's place, only you kept the door closed. I saw Uncle Joe's bare ass and it was disgusting. He had a tattoo on it. Mom never knew I was there, and I was afraid to tell you. I knew it would hurt you." "What about Warren?" "What did you see?" "I heard my mom talking to him on the phone. She said his name. She told him I was going to my grandmother's house later. Just before I left, I was packing my overnight bag when he walked in. He grabbed my mom and kissed her. She didn't know I had seen them. She told him he had to wait until I left. When I came out of the bedroom, he just smiled at me, thanked my mom, and left. When Grandma dropped me off the next morning, he was still there and acted like he forgot to bring milk or something. Daddy, I may be young, but I'm not stupid. I didn't know whether to be angry or smile after her words. I just knew that it was over between Susan and me. I didn't care what the cost was. When we got home, Trina barely spoke to her mom. She would answer any question she was asked, but otherwise she didn't say anything. The next morning, I drove Trina to school and then went to see John, my attorney. He told me that Susan was right and that our property would be divided 50-50. We had a couple of surprises that Susan didn't know about. I asked John to get us a quick hearing so I could get Susan out of the house. There was no way I wanted to stay in the same house with her. On the way home, I stopped by my mom's house and asked if Trina could stay with her for a few days. I told her that Susan and I were getting divorced and I didn't want Trina to be the center of things. Mom told me to take as much as I needed. I told her I would come over to Trina's house every night. When I got home, Susan came in and laid out her demands to me. She wanted everything she could get, plus large child support payments. She even asked for child support. How stupid could she have been? I figured she hadn't told her lawyer the whole truth. I didn't say a word to her. I just went to bed. The next day, my attorney John told me he had scheduled a custody and residence hearing for Monday. When I got home that evening, Susan said, "How stupid can you be? You're going to make a fool of yourself by saying I cheated on you." Yes, I got the papers at work. You don't have any proof, asshole. You're only going to make a fool of yourself. I didn't argue with her again, though I would have loved to kick her ass. I needed custody of Trina, and if I abused Susan, it wouldn't look good. On Monday, we went to the judge's chambers. I picked Trina up from school and took her with me. Susan was with her lawyer. John, my lawyer, met us there. "What is Trina doing here?" Susan asked. "She's part of the divorce. She should have the right to decide where she wants to live," I replied. "That's nonsense. Children should be with their mother," objected Susan. "Well, I guess we'll let the judge decide," was all I said. We all went into his office. "This is not a divorce decree, it's a hearing," the judge said. "We're here to decide who gets what and where they're going to live. If everyone agrees, that can be stated in the divorce papers. If not, we will be governed by my ruling until there is a trial where all the evidence is presented and judgments are made." The judge asked Trina to wait in the hall. He would speak to her in a few minutes. She stood up and quietly walked out of the hall. "She seems a very well-mannered girl," said the judge. "It's a pity you couldn't settle with her." Susan almost smirked. "Thank you, Judge, I try very hard," Susan replied. Damn it, she should have been an actress. I just sat there and remained silent, preferring not to argue. Susan's lawyer handed the judge the papers requesting custody of Trina. $150 a week for child support and another $100 a week for alimony. She asked for the house and property, knowing she could only get half the value of the house. The judge looked over her paperwork and noted that in this state, divorce is no fault and everything is divided in half. That made Susan smirk again, deciding she would get what she wanted. The judge then looked at me. "Mr. Royer, you have petitioned the court for this early hearing. What are your grounds for divorce?" "Judge, she's been having affairs behind my back. I don't want my daughter around her." Susan shrieked. "You can't prove anything." "You're pathetic!" "Go ahead and provide the judge with pictures or phone records. Maybe you have video. You don't have any proof? There are only rumors from you." The judge told Susan to calm down and looked at me and asked if I had any such evidence. "Sir, I have a witness to 2 events. My daughter Trina saw her mother's infidelity." "You're a liar!" Susan shouted. "Trina was never there." "How can you use our daughter like that?" Susan apparently didn't realize she had said too much, but her lawyer did. He asked Susan to calm down. The judge stood up. "I'm going to talk to the girl alone in the hallway. I want to see what she has to say." After about 10 minutes, he returned to the chambers. "She's a very nice girl. We had a good talk and I believe her, but I have a few questions for Mrs. Royer." "He told her what to say," Susan said. "I would never do anything that would hurt my daughter. He made the whole thing up." "Mrs. Royer, your daughter mentioned Uncle Joe. Are you familiar with this man?" the judge asked. "Yes, he's a family friend, but just a friend." I've never done anything with him, Susan replied. Can you tell me if your daughter can somehow find out that he has a tattoo of a skeleton and crossbones on his back? If need be, we can subpoena him. Oh my God, she wasn't there. She couldn't have seen it. She would have told me, Susan replied. She told me Susan. She said she saw you and Joe when she went back to get her bike. She also saw you with Warren. The reason she didn't tell you is because you were never there. And anyway, what did you expect her to say? I remarked. The judge made his ruling. Mr. Royer will have custody of your daughter Trina, but Mrs. Royer will have broad visitation rights. The house and all its contents will be appraised and divided equally. John, my attorney, spoke up. Sir, we have brought in a firm that has taken an inventory of the property and its current value. The house was worth $120,000, but we owed $70,000, making the net worth $50,000. The contents were valued at $30,000. Thus, the total net worth was $80,000. This included our 2 automobiles. Is that all? Susan exclaimed. I bought that furniture and car myself. They cost a lot more than that. I'm sorry, Mrs. Royer, but no one wins in a divorce. Mr. Royer, you'll get the house and contents, but you'll have to pay Mrs. Royer $30,000, and you can each keep your own car. Or we'll have to auction everything off and split the proceeds after the debts are paid. I've noticed that savings are out of the question. What, he gets the house? That's not fair. I bought all this furniture with my own money, Susan said. In a marriage, it doesn't matter who bought what. There was no prenup, so everything is divided in half. He's being offered the house because he has a daughter. She is the most important thing here. Her friends and surroundings are important to her. Mr. Royer, is there any way you can get $30,000 for half of Mrs. Royer's estate? The judge asked. Yes, sir, I can borrow it from my parents and pay them back. I'm sure the banks won't lend us any money until the divorce is final. Mrs. Royer, one last thing. I noticed that you and Mr. Royer seem to have about the same income. I was surprised to hear that. So, since you have decided that $150 a week would be a fair amount of alimony, you will pay it to Mr. Royer. Neither of you will receive alimony. You will have 3 days to vacate the premises, and you may take only your personal belongings. That's not fair! Why should I have to pay him? It's not my fault he's weak. I just shook my head. The judge spoke one last time. If any of you want to fight the divorce and the settlement agreement I have prepared, you are always welcome. Mrs. Royer, his evidence is more than enough to get custody, and the property division will probably stay in effect. I walked out into the hall and hugged Trina. I know she loved her mother, and it's going to be hard on her, but we'll get through this. This is not the end. In the second chapter, we will tell you what happened next. Chapter 2. Susan was very angry about the judge's decision. She thought about appealing it, but her lawyer said she had little chance of winning. I think what she hated most of all was that she would have to pay me $150 a week for child support. I have to admit I was a little surprised by that. My father lent me money to pay off Susan. I promised him I would pay him back. Every week when the court sent me money from Susan, I gave it to my father. I was making more than enough to live on, and when Susan was gone, I even had some money to save. Life wasn't bad except for the fact that Susan was bugging me. Trina told me that on the weekends she spent with her mother, she was constantly being asked about me. Trina told me that her mom apologized for what she saw. Apparently, she did have some respect for Trina, or was still acting like a good mom. After a couple months, Susan started making excuses as to why she couldn't take Trina. It was either working late or traveling on business. Supposedly, she became a secretary to a couple of lawyers. There was no way she would have told me more. I figured she did some of the work on her back. I didn't care as long as she didn't do it in front of Trina. One day, my dad called me into the office. He said he had a surprise for me. I walked in and saw an old friend. It was Samantha. We always called her Sam. When I was about 12 or so, Sam moved in with us as a foster child. She was 14 at the time. Her parents had been caught dealing drugs and sent to prison. Mom and Dad were asked to auction off their house and belongings. That's when they met Sam. She was going to live in an institution when my mom asked to be her foster parent. Most people take younger children into foster care, But my parents saw something special in Sam. She stayed with us until she enlisted when she graduated from high school. I liked her a lot and missed her when she went into the service. She was kind of a tomboy and didn't put up with crap from anyone. I know she loved my parents just by her actions. Whenever they asked her to do something, she never gave them any slack. Several guys were hitting on me, and I saw her kick one of them in the gonads and hit another one with a 2x4. She told them that if they ever molested me again, she would kick their asses. I should say they were 2 grades above me. I doubt I would have stood a chance. I guess that's when I realized I was weak. I was pretty smart and helped Sam with her homework. She was like a big sister to me. I loved her in a way, but I never told her that. I hugged her when she left and tears came to my eyes. She came home on vacation, but I was in college. It was the first time I'd seen her in 10 years. She looked good. It's hard to describe her. Long blonde hair, a good figure as far as I could tell, and a smile with big dimples. She hugged me tightly. Dad said he'd hired her as our new secretary. I remembered years ago he had told her that if she needed anything, to let him know. Now that she was out of the service, she was looking for a job. She said she spent the early years of her life in combat and the last few years overseas, working mostly in computers and electronics. During our divorce, it was so nice to see Sam's smiling face every morning. I want to add that Susan and Sam didn't like each other from the first day they met. I remember Susan saying that Sam seemed strange to her. She even said she wondered if she was a lesbian since she didn't really date. How did she know if Sam was dating or not? She must be under surveillance or something. I knew that several divorced agents had asked Sam out on dates, but she respectfully declined. She never told anyone about her personal life. Sam, on the other hand, said she enjoyed studying people and didn't think Susan was trustworthy. Mark, I care about you. I don't want to tell you how to live your life, but don't trust her. I didn't trust Susan. I'd heard rumors that she continued to schmooze with him even during their separation. It made me look bad, but I had to put my best foot forward so I didn't lose Trina. On Saturday, Dad invited Trina and I to Sam's homecoming party. When we arrived, I introduced Trina to Sam. They got along great for a long time. Trina never left her side the whole time we were there. I think they both made a new friend. It turned out that when Trina met Sam, there was an instant connection between them. Sam would go low when he talked to Trina. I knew Trina like that. Halloween was approaching and Sam asked Trina what she was going to wear to trick or treat. Trina replied that she probably couldn't go this year. She said her mom would be late at work and wouldn't be able to take her. For those readers who don't know what trick-or-treating is, I'll try to explain. On Halloween, little kids dress up in costumes, go around the neighborhood and get candy. It used to be customary that if a treat wasn't given, a prank was played on the person who didn't give it. These days, there aren't as many pranks, and neighbors who want to participate leave their porch lights on. Sam looked up at me for an explanation. I usually hand out candy to the neighborhood kids, and Susan usually takes Trina door to door. This year, she said she had to work. I guess she doesn't feel obligated because of the divorce. Later, I told Sam the truth about Susan going to the Halloween party herself. Sam was very angry that his mother had put herself before her daughter. Sam, Susan has always put herself first, I explained. Trina, Sam said, do you want me to take you trick-or-treating with me? I'll put on my uniform and go with you. Trina couldn't be more excited. She told Sam that she was going to dress up as a princess because that's what her dad always called her. That showed me once again what kind of person Sam was. I wondered why Susan couldn't be just as nice. Susan would come into the house and always make some excuse about forgetting something. I think she was just testing me. But it didn't do any good because I was just the same old weakling. When Susan found out that Sam had invited Trina to Halloween, she was furious. Trina and I deserve to live too. Go to your fucking party. Sam and I will make sure Trina goes to Trina's trick-or-treat. I couldn't wait until the divorce was final. After that, I'd have no reason to let Susan in the house. Now I was biding my time. When Trina wasn't around, Susan was always throwing herself and her lovers at me. She just wouldn't let me rest. I know I shouldn't have let it bother me, but it did. For Halloween, I dressed Trina up in a princess outfit. She looked so cute. Sam came in her uniform, and I have to say I have never seen a prettier soldier. I gave them both a bag each, and they went for a walk to get candy. I sat on the porch and handed out candy to all the ghosts, goblins, and other kids dressed in colorful costumes. About an hour and a half later, 2 of my treat lovers came in with bags full of candy. Sam said Trina was very exhausted. We turned off the porch light since most of the kids were done, and Sam helped Trina with her costume. I made us all some popcorn, poured us a glass of apple cider, and we decided to watch Heroes. It was a show about a group of people with superpowers. Some could read minds, some couldn't die. One woman could freeze anything, and some could even travel through time. I told Sam that I had just gotten interested in the show and was watching it with Trina. Of course, Trina always falls asleep, so I end up watching it by myself. It was so nice to have Sam by my side. It was like a family, but Sam was just a good friend and foster sister. Finally, the day came when our divorce was final and life went on as usual. I really enjoyed practicing with Trina. She was my life now. I should mention that right after Trina was born, I had a DNA test done. She really was my daughter. I never told Susan that I did that test. I have to say there was a bad side to my life. I knew about Joe, Warren, and Brad. I guess there were countless others, but I didn't know any of the names. I guess that was a good thing. Deep down, I wanted revenge, but I didn't know how to go about it. Every time I saw one of those assholes, they would snicker and laugh at me. I realized this embarrassed Trina, but she didn't say anything. I knew I had to get revenge somehow, but how? I saw Sam every day when I went to work. She was one of the bright spots in my life. Ever since Sam and I finalized our divorce, we'd gotten closer and closer at the office. She did everything for me. It was like she became my personal secretary. She made appointments for me and brought me a lot of clients. One day when I brought Trina to the office, she and Sam were talking. When I came back from the office, Trina asked me if Sam could come with us to eat and go to the movies. Princess, Sam probably already has plans. No, I don't, Sam smiled. She probably won't like pizza and a kids' movie. I love pizza and I love cartoons, Sam said, still smiling. What can I say? I think those two had it all planned out. I set a time and told Sam we were coming to pick her up. We had a great time. I loved having the company of adults, especially Sam, and he and Trina got along great. On the way home, I said, "We should do this again sometime." Trina looked at Sam and said, "Tomorrow night, Dad and I are going to make popcorn and watch Hero together. Do you want to join us?" I was about to make another excuse, but Sam spoke first. "I'd love to come watch TV with you and your dad." I was really happy about that, but I knew I had to control my emotions around Sam. We were just friends and she trusted me. I didn't want to do anything that would jeopardize our relationship. About halfway through the show, Trina fell asleep. Sam looked at me and asked what I was thinking. She replied that I had a silly grin on my face. I figured if I had superpowers, I could get rid of these assholes who ruined my marriage and made me a wimp. "Mark, you won. Leave it alone." "You have a beautiful daughter, a good job, and a great place to live," Sam said. "I know you're right, but I can't deal with being laughed at every time I see those assholes. If I had superpowers, I could get my revenge." "So, what kind of power do you want?" Sam asked, agreeing with me. "I don't know, maybe have something happen to them. Like Warren freezing to death in his own refrigerator at work. Maybe a barbel would fall on Brad and crush his windpipe." "You're thinking about all the bad things, Mark. That's not good. What about the good ones?" She smiled at me. I had good ones. I wanted to kiss Sam and make love to him, but I knew that wasn't possible. Some thoughts I had to keep to myself. Sam got up to leave and thanked me for inviting her. She said she had a great time and asked me to kiss Trina for her. I hugged her and walked her to the door. The next morning, we woke up to a thunderstorm. After picking Trina up for school, I dropped her off and headed to my office. As I was getting out of the car, a light struck right next to me. I don't think it hit me, but it knocked me over and I hit my head on the car. The next thing I knew, I woke up in a hospital bed. Sam was standing over me. "What happened?" I asked. "I remember seeing the light and falling down." "According to the doctors, you fell and hit your head on the car. You have a concussion. They did an MRI and you'll be fine, but you'll have to spend tonight in the hospital," Sam replied. "What about Trina?" I asked. "I'll pick her up from school and bring her to you. She can spend the night with me if you don't mind. Of course, there's nothing wrong with me. There's no one I trust more. Shit, my head is splitting. Of course, you just hit your head and got a concussion. Don't worry, the doctor said you'll be as good as new in a couple of days. There was something else, but I didn't want to tell Sam about it. I felt like I could do something special, like a superpower. I wondered if I could bend people's wills. I know I shouldn't have done it, but I made Sam kiss me. Well, I'd better get back to the office. Take care of yourself and obey the doctors. Then she leaned over and kissed me on the lips. It was more than a kiss, and it felt so good. Oh, I forgot to mention that an old college friend of yours stopped by the office this morning. He said he'd stop by here to see you. She gave me another kiss and left. I wondered if I had a superpower. She kissed me willingly. I also wondered who might have stopped by for a visit. I fell asleep and was awakened by my old friend Tony DeMarco from college. He said he had business in Ohio and decided to stop by and see me. We talked about old times and I thanked him for helping me get laid. We both laughed and he asked me about Susan. I told him about her cheating and how we got divorced. I told him I had a beautiful daughter. He mentioned that he had 3 children and was happily married. Before he left, he reminded me that if I ever needed anything, to let him know. I thought maybe I should hire him to take down a couple of my old enemies, but there was no way I was going to ask a friend to do that. I started thinking about Warren again and how he was laughing at me. He'd stood in front of me just 2 days ago, telling his buddies how he'd just gotten back from having sex with my ex. God, I wanted to punch him. While I was thinking about revenge, I looked up and saw Trina with Sam. Hey, princess, how's school going? Okay, Dad, Sam told me you got caught under the lights and hit your head. Are you okay? I'm fine. Hopefully I can get out of here tomorrow, I replied. Sam's taking me to my grandmother's, but he'll be back tonight to take me to his place. I'd like you to come with us. That brought a smile to my face. I would love to spend the night at Sam's. I looked at her and probably thought the same thing. I had to stop doing this. If Sam and I are meant to be together, I want it because she wants to be with me, not just because of my will. The doctor wanted to keep me one more day. There was no point in arguing with him. Besides, Sam said she thought it was best too. When she moved closer and looked into my eyes, I couldn't help but want another kiss, and I got it. Mark, there's something I have to tell you. It's very personal, but I feel like you need to know. What's the matter, Sam? She looked a little nervous. She asked Trina to wait for her in the hallway. I haven't told you the whole truth and I have to tell you. What's to tell? Before I was released from the service, I was placed in a psychiatric ward for 2 months. I wasn't crazy, but I stabbed 2 soldiers to death. You don't have to tell me that, Sam. Yes, I want to. Please let me finish. We were company at a bar, and the guys had a little too much to drink. They started groping and grabbing me. I asked them several times to stop, but they wouldn't stop. 2 of them grabbed me, one holding me down and the other trying to undress me. The other guys were standing around laughing. I managed to grab a beer bottle, smash it over one guy's head, take the broken bottle, and stab the other guy in the stomach. The next thing I knew, the MPs arrested me and took me to a psychiatric ward where I spent 2 months. All the soldiers united and said it was all done for nothing, and I became violent. They wrote it off as some kind of syndrome. I just wanted you to know the truth about my past. I feel so sorry for you. You deserve so much better. Thank you for trusting me. I wondered if I had asked her to be honest with me. I knew I would have to keep an eye on that power. After she left, I thought about her, Tony, and Warren as I fell asleep. The next morning, I was woken up by Trina and Sam. Daddy, you can come home today. Sam and I are taking you out for breakfast. We're going to McDonald's. Not my favorite place to eat, but the company was nice. While we ate, Trina told me about everything she had done in the last 2 days. She said she had slept with Sam in her big bed. I laughed when she said I should sleep there sometime. I know she just wasn't thinking, but I liked the idea. When I got home, I started reading the newspaper. I noticed that Warren from the grocery store had been found frozen in the freezer. Apparently, the internal opening mechanism didn't work and he had frozen to death. The article said they didn't suspect foul play. It was just an accident. My father called and asked if I was all right. He was out of town and didn't have time to visit me in the hospital. After I said I was fine, he asked if I could go to the grocery store where Warren worked and fill out an insurance claim. Apparently, Warren was insured with us. Some people looked at me strangely as I filled out the paperwork. They all knew how Warren had bragged about taking down my ex-girlfriend. I guess they had to wonder if I had something to do with it. They had no idea I had bequeathed it. I mentioned to Sam that I had bequeathed it, and that I had told her about it the week before. In a weird way, I killed Warren. Mark, it was an accident. Just because you thought so doesn't make you responsible, Sam replied. Sam, you don't understand. I'm not sad about what happened. He was an asshole and a jerk, and I'm not sad at all that he froze to death. I'm just wondering exactly how it happened. If you believe you have some super magical power, put it to good use. Wish for more sales and a better life, Sam said. Over the next week, I completed all the appointments that Sam had set up for me. Before going into each house, I willed them to purchase insurance. I also sold 2 houses that week. I was happy, Dad was happy, and so was Sam. Life was good until I ran into Brad. I had an appointment with a realtor to put the house on the market. When I got there, no one answered the door for several minutes. I tried ringing the doorbell again and was answered by a nice-looking woman in a bathrobe. I'm Mark Royer. We agreed to sign the papers on your property. I have a plaque to put in your yard. I'm sorry, I lost track of time. Can I sign the papers and you can put a sign on the lawn? You can take pictures of the house from the outside, but if you can come back another time and take some pictures inside. I'd like to get it cleaned up first. No problem. I'll send someone over tomorrow to take the rest of the pictures. I went outside and started taking some pictures. And then I noticed a car parked on the opposite side of the street. It was Brad's car. I knew him well from the way he sat in my driveway. He must have been sleeping with Mrs. Diaz. Sam said the woman was getting a divorce and wanted to sell her house. I wondered if Brad was the cause of her divorce. So it looks like old Brad wasn't just cheating on Jill, he was cheating on Susan too. There was nothing I could do about it. I called Susan to make sure she was picking up Trina for the weekend, but mostly I wanted to tell her that I had seen Brad. I know I only saw his car, but that was enough for me. 2 days later, Brad was found dead on one of the exercise machines. Apparently, he had been exercising and the weight was too heavy. The barbell slipped and crushed his larynx. The police questioned him. I know they stopped by my place, but I had a great alibi. I was with Trina at school. She was at play, but unfortunately her mom couldn't make it. I wondered if it was my desire that had caused this to happen. I was sure it had, but I hoped Jill hadn't. She deserved so much better than she got. I remember talking to Sam about it, and I reminded her of how I'd told her that was how I'd wanted him to die. I know I didn't make Jill do it, but it was all new to me. I really needed to learn to control my thoughts better. The police had left the case open for now, but they hadn't ruled out murder, although it could have been an accident. My sales had improved dramatically, and our life with Trina couldn't have been better. Sam was coming into our lives more and more often. Every time I was going to take Trina somewhere, she always asked if Sam could come with us too. I was completely confused with my thoughts and emotions. Had I caused Trina to have all these emotions towards Sam? Did Sam really want to come with us because I decided to? Believe it or not, I really didn't like that part of it. I wanted the 3 of us to be together simply because we wanted to be. I didn't want it to be of my own free will. I was to work in a new housing estate. There were several construction companies working there, and I wrote all the liability insurance for the developers. I had to check each construction company and get the necessary insurance forms. Before you know it, I stumbled upon the company that Joe Akers worked for. It was the same infamous Uncle Joe that Trina had seen with my ex. He laughed at me as I walked by. If only people knew how the guy felt. I approached him when he was alone and said, "I'm going to make you die. I did it to Warren, Brad, and now you. Laugh about it, you son of a bitch." He looked completely dumbfounded when I left. I know he must have read about the death in the paper, and I'm sure he knew about my divorce. At least I gave him something to think about. My friend Tony called me and said he would be passing through town and asked if we could have lunch. We met, talked about old times, and he invited me to New York for a vacation. He asked if I was seeing anyone, and I told him I had a woman I liked, but we weren't serious. I told him about Sam, and he said it sounded pretty serious to him. He asked how I was doing after the divorce. He knew I had become a cuckold, and I was having a hard time living with it. I told him that 2 guys had been found dead. Hell, maybe the 3rd one will show up the same way, he grinned as he said those words. Anyway, ask this woman Sam if she would like to go to New York with you. Take your daughter and my wife with you, and I'll show you the city. That evening I called Sam and told her about what Joe had said. I mentioned that I was so tired of being laughed at that I told him I was bequeathing his death. Then I told her that maybe I should add Susan to my list. Mark, you have to stop this. I'm worried about you. As for Susan, she's your daughter's mother. You can't hurt her. So what did you say to this Joe? That it's his turn. I don't know how he'll die. I haven't made a will yet. Just stop it, Mark. You can't keep this up. Please, if for no other reason, stop it for me. I wasn't sure what she meant. I was never sure if her thoughts were really hers or mine. I changed the subject and asked if she wanted to go on vacation to New York. My friend Tony had invited us and would show us around the city. She immediately agreed. Of course, I had to wonder if it was my willful thought or her own decision. I really didn't like that power. Good thing I was rid of the assholes, but what about my relationship with Sam? Was it real or not? I had an evening meeting, so I drove Trina to her parents' house. After getting the papers signed, I was headed back into town when I was hit by another car. The next thing I knew, I was back in the hospital. Next to his father, Sam was sitting next to him again. What happened? I think I got hit sideways. How long was I out for? The first to speak was my father. You were in a coma for 3 days. Sam, your mom and I took turns sitting with you. What about Trina? Is she okay? She's fine, but she's worried about her father, Sam said. Like the rest of us. She was staying with your mom. We didn't want to bring her here and see you unconscious. We're bringing her here this afternoon, Dad said. Is there something you're not telling me? It feels like you want to tell me something, but you're waiting. Dad spoke up. I thought it could wait, but since you asked, I can tell you. Joe Akers was killed the same night you were in the accident. The police were looking for you, but knew it couldn't have been you, since you were in a coma in the hospital. Killed? How? Where? I asked. I saw him a couple days ago at a construction site. That's why the police were looking for you. I think he told some of his friends that he had sex with Susan. That woman sure fooled me, Dad said. Sam took in the scene. Apparently, his truck caught fire in front of Susan's apartment. According to the report, he was visiting Susan, and as he was leaving, he got into his truck and it burst into flames. He was drunk and he didn't stand a chance. He was burned alive. I looked at Sam. She knew what I was thinking. I willed his death, but how I don't know. I couldn't remember. All I could think about was getting hit by a car. Sam and Dad left, but said they'd be back later to visit me and bring Trina. I thought of Sam, but no kiss followed. I wondered if I had lost my superpower. I felt good and I felt hungry. I wanted steak but got meatloaf. I decided to give it a try. Mom brought Trina to me. I was so happy to see them both. I asked about Sam, and Mom said she was busy finishing up my work. She can do everything except sign legal documents. You really care about Sam, don't you, Mark? I see it every time she's around. I'm sorry, Mom. We have nothing to regret. She's a wonderful person and we love her. She was a foster child, not your sister. It's okay to fall in love with her, Mom said, smiling at me. But Mom, I don't know how she feels. We've never talked about it. She's so good with Trina. I love Sam, Trina said. She's beautiful and she treats me well. She even treats me better than Mommy does. I think she loves you too, Daddy. What makes you think it's a princess? I asked Trina. Just the way she acts around you, and she always walks with us when you ask, Trina replied. I wondered if it was because of my will. I guess abilities aren't all they're cracked up to be. The doctor said I could go home after lunch. Mom called the office and told Dad that she and Trina would stay with me and take me home. In the evening, Sam came over to watch Heroes with me and Trina. She made us popcorn, and we sat on the couch and watched the show. As usual, Trina fell asleep, so Sam took her to her room and put her to bed. When she came back into the room, I blinked my eyes again and again. What are you doing, Mark? Are your eyes okay? Do you want me to call a doctor? After all, you have another concussion. No, I wanted to see if I'd lost my powers. I decided I'd lost them when I tried to use them at the hospital. What were you trying to do? The 3 men you wanted revenge on are dead. At the hospital, I tried to get them to bring me a steak. Sam laughed. So what were you trying to do when I walked into the room? I can't tell you, I'm embarrassed. Come on, you know you can trust me, Sam replied. I wanted to see if I could get you to kiss me. I stared at her. She looked into my eyes again. I had no idea what she was thinking. If that's what you wanted, all you had to do was ask. She leaned forward and kissed me. Mark, I've been waiting for you. I wasn't sure how you felt, and I didn't want to ruin our relationship. I've cared about you since I came back to town. That's why I told you about my past. I even kissed you at the hospital, but you never kissed me back. That's because I thought you only kissed me because I wanted you to. I wanted you to kiss me because I wanted you to. Then why don't you want us to make love together? For the same reason. I wanted you to want me for who I am, not because you were made to want me. So you have no power now, right? Sam asked. Right, replied I. All the strength is gone. Then take me to your bedroom and make love to me. I really want to. I took her hand and led her to my bedroom. You're so beautiful, I remarked. This is reality, isn't it? I'm not hallucinating or dreaming, am I? No, we're real, she said. We climbed up on the bed and started having fun. The last thing I remember before I fall asleep are Sam's words. I love you.